Well, that's weird. It works now. Welcome.
Oh,
He's coming in just a little bit. Have a seat. We have some refreshments here. It works now.
is this
Yeah, it's a Paul Tremblay event.
what?
Yeah, for the author event?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Are you Professor?
Welcome. I am. Sorry about that. I'm it's currently live streaming just because I'm lazy. I don't want to edit later. Yeah, I'm Professor Estrada. Nice to meet you. But I gotta run to the bathroom and run back. So I'll be right back. Yeah. Super. When I also viene Paul, can you let him in? Do you know how to do that? It'll say, okay, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
All people. For the apples, you know. They're, they're on the trees. She left them on the tree. Beating them up. This whole YA book, you know,
Okay.
is the author of YA author. Oh,
Sure.
somebody's trying to. Well,
Welcome, welcome. I have some refreshments for you all. Water and chippies. I'm also live streaming right now, so if you don't want to be on the camera, let me know. Hello, hello, come on in. Oh, right, so here is the amazing Paul Tremblay coming in. All right, all right. I know I'm a disembodied voice right now, Paul. I wanted you to see the group. How's it going? It's good to
Almost
see
there. Hey, how you doing?
you. Hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. We're just getting ready for a nor'easter, but otherwise we're okay.
Yeah, it's raining like a mother and snowing and raining, so
Yeah.
it's good for my cabeza head. But just let me show because that's just somebody voice. Hey everybody, we are live streaming, so if you want to fix your camera or change your name, feel free. But these, are you all Maria Ortiz's students?
Yeah.
Sweet. What class are you all taking?
Literature.
These are Maria's literature students. One of my students say hi. I don't know if you can see you. So this is also post spring break. So we also got some amazing people. Kirsten is here. I see. Oh, Leonardo needs to be admitted. My bad. Okay. Hey, come on in.
He's on Zoom.
He's on Zoom. You'll want some chips and water. We got some refreshments. Help yourselves. What's up, Leo? This is one of my English 102 students. Well, so the thing is like a lot of writers are busy. Like I really tried getting Gabino Iglesias here, and I was gonna pay for his plane ticket and his hotel, and he couldn't get it. And I'm like, what the? Like really? Like bring the dude with you. Come on now. No, that was not happening, Paul. It's so good to see you. You look good. You look like you're losing weight, brother. What's up with that?
Oh, thanks. I've got, the fancy light up here. So it does well.
It's not the
Switch to
light.
these glasses.
That's all it took.
Yeah.
We're just gonna wait because we're running on Harold Washington time. Come on in.
Oh, sure.
We got chips and water.
Oh, thank you.
The only thing I forgot to get is napkins. I think y'all will be all right.
We'll use our masks.
Yeah, I know. It tastes better with your fingers anyway. So like most things. Good group. Much better than last time. So last time Paul came in was a huge deal because I'm a big Paul Tremblay nerd. I say I'm his biggest fan. I claim it. And there were like two people that happened to just walk by and see the poster, and everybody else was on Zoom, But it's also a little later, so I'm so glad y'all came in. And I know
Thanks for coming.
It's after spring break too, so they're just not getting back into the groove. By the way, Paul got 2 weeks off. I was like,
I wouldn't come back if I.
Yeah. Well, I'm at a high school, so we don't like my school. Well, in Boston area, the public schools do a week in February and a week in April. And I teach at a private school, so we can do whatever we want. So they do 2 weeks off in March instead, which is much better. It's nice having those 2 weeks off, but it does make it hard to go back after those 2 weeks.
And you teach math, so how's that? Going good?
It's going. Yeah, we're struggling to the finish line with some of the classes, but it's fine.
He did his math?
He's a math professor, yes. In fact, I was in. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the sound right. How's that? Is that okay? Is that good? Right there.
Yeah.
We'll keep playing with it. A little loud. How's that? Is that it's good?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
No, you're good. I think the volume was messed with. It's always hard to get these things correct. Yeah. So we were goofing this morning. I was advertising the event again because I was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be Wednesday after spring break, and so I was pitching it to a horror Facebook group, and you got a lot of fans there who can't be here, but they're gonna watch the stream later. And this woman was like, I would read anything Paul writes. I would read a math up to the calculus part. Just like gushing and gushing. So I screenshot it and I sent it to him. Like, check this out. You are loved. There's a lot of people that are working right now. So
I appreciate it.
all right. So welcome. Thank you for coming. This is, I believe, the fourth event I've had this semester. I have two more coming up. One in about the middle of April called Empire in Transition. I'm gonna have Tango Eason Martin, the San Francisco Poet Laureate, and Misa Juarez. I was gonna have Lucha Cherchu, but instead I'm gonna have another international poet. She's gonna come a little later. So I'm trying to, I know it seems like I do love horror, but this semester I brought a lot of horror writers. These are gonna be poets, and I think you'll enjoy that. Also, a lot of times I do book giveaways, but spring break kind of threw me. So what I'm gonna do is just give away some Kindle books. So leave me your email, some of you, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, probably just guess the animal or guess the number, or maybe put a number from 1 to 10. I'll pick the 3. But yeah, so it's a huge pleasure and honor to have Paul Tremblay here. He is twice Bram Stoker winner, which is a huge deal, has won a lot of awards, and just a phenomenal writer. In fact, we were just talking about A Head Full of Ghosts, me and this other dude, just saying how much we love your work. And so you'll get to know more about him, but we have the privilege and honor of having him write from his upcoming book, which is going to be released in June. It's called Horror Movie, and the description is so dope that I was like, definitely gonna pre-order it, come paycheck. So he's gonna read for about 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get the opportunity to ask him questions. And he is also a teacher, which makes him even more rad. Just saying, but he's a wonderful human being. So I always say, think of this as your second home, Paul. It's such an honor and pleasure to have you here. So let's give a huge round of applause to Paul.
Oh, thank you. All right. So, okay, I am going to read. I wasn't sure if I was going to present something or read, but reading sounds easier to me. Um,
Oh,
well, thanks.
screen
So,
sharing too, brother. Let me give you screen sharing too. You said you wanted that. You can also share the screen.
yeah, I was only going to do that if I was going to, you know what? How long do we have? Like, can I
You
do
are
like
like
a fun, goofy 5 minute presentation of something? I promise it'll
absolutely.
be fun. I think it'll
We
be
got
fun.
an hour and 30 minutes, so I'm
Oh,
gonna be
Jesus, an hour, 30
starting.
minutes. Okay.
Hey, it's gonna fly by, bro, just like last time.
Yeah.
It went by like boom.
Okay. Um, I'll read after, but so I have a little presentation because as we were talking, if some people just joining, I do teach high school math by day. Actually, Jesus, this is my 28th year at the school. I started
27
teaching.
higher ed, brother. You are not alone.
I started teaching when I was 14. I was very smart. I'm just kidding. I wish. Um, so like I don't do like I've only done like teaching writing workshops like a few times. So I'm gonna do like this little piece that I'm actually quite proud of. And I promise it's very short and hopefully not too boring. But sort of the point of the this little presentation I'm going to do, um, well, hopefully the point will be obvious at the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down what I think is the best horror story ever written. I'm going to break it down in its entirety. You're going to be blown away. Some of you may have read it, some of you may not have read it. Um, I will say sort of like the ultimate theme of it is like all stories need what's called lift. And I'm borrowing that term from John Gardner, who any writers out there, John Gardner has a writing book called The Art of Fiction. You know, at this point it's probably like 40 years old, but I still think it's one of the best writing books on fiction. And for him, lift was always every story, whether or not it's a genre story or not, needs like a sense of a sense of offness to help it take off. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm going to try sharing my screen.
I actually think I have that book in my bookshelf.
All right, and so I'm going to start the slideshow. Uh-oh. Boom. Let's see if that started.
It's slideshow and then the top option. There you go.
Play from start. It wasn't playing. There we go. Okay, perfect. And I'll minimize that so people don't feel like they're staring at each other. Okay. So I know I've talked it up, but like I am going to talk about my favorite
Oh my
horror
God,
book.
shoot. I messed up my question. I made a mistake. Hold on. I'll
Sure,
pause
sure.
it. Okay, there we go. There, you're good.
Okay. Yeah. So we're actually going to talk about this, and you're going to get to experience this book in its entirety. The title of the book is The Monster at the End of This Book, starring lovable furry old Grover. Now listen, already with the cover, the story is already beginning, right? There's no author name. That's so weird. We know the main character. It's lovable furry old Grover. Grover even speaks to us. Boom. And this is the title page. The title page, we get more character, we get humor, we get inquisitiveness. The fourth wall is already clearly broken, like he's turning a physical page of the book. We are entering into metafiction. So these are pages, 2 and 3. The rest of these are 2 pages at a time. So right from this first page, this first set of pages, we get the what if, the plot of the book, the lift. There's a monster at the end, and Grover is scared, so we are scared, but also a little excited. That's the thrill of horror, the thrill of transgression. Oh, I did. Okay, that worked. um, Let's see. So we, the readers, are introduced to the story. Grover tells us if we don't turn any pages, we're not going to find the monster. So we are a character as well. Grover's existential anguish and horror. We see it not only by the image, but by the font size. Let's see. So on this page, we're getting even more of a desperate explanation as to why we should stop turning pages, a reminder that there's a monster at the end. Grover is now trying to stop us. So wait a minute. Are we, the readers, the antagonist? Are we the Renfield to the end of the book's Dracula? More anguish. Sorry for the blur. More anguish and font. And we are the readers implicated again in the horror. What are we doing to poor lovable furry Grover? Maybe we are the monsters. So I love the style here. Grover. We get a great little narrative voice, a taste of what Grover's voice sounds like, and it's a callback. Even just the Grover is a callback to all sorts of famous epistolary novels. And he's again attempting to stop us. So the cracks of resignation are starting to show with poor Grover. Also, further implication of our own monstrousness by telling us what a terrible mess we're making. And again, more breaking of the fourth wall because so many of us feel shame for our messy rooms. I know I do. So we have more continued causality and escalation. We might be reminded of the classic Grimm's fairy tale at this point of the Three Little Pigs, right? With this brick wall. Right before it was he's building with wood or a stick wall. Before that were ropes. Ropes are sort of like straw. Work with me. But again, he's daring us. He's actually boldly daring us, trying a different psychological tactic. Oh man. He tells us he tells us we are strong. Is he, sort of like coding for us that he's telling us that we can handle this story, that we can handle the monster at the end of the book? Oh boy, we're one last reminder. We have arrived at the climax. Grover is scared. We are scared, but we are also thrilled. Even if the last page isn't a mirror, we are definitely the monster. All right. Oh, no, it's Grover. Or is it? I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think we're satisfied by the reveal, but something lingers. We were told that this was the end, but there is actually one more page. Grover is so embarrassed by what? His lack of knowledge? Is he embarrassed by our page turning? Without the text bubble, the Grover image is almost the scream, right? The painting of the scream, his existential dread and horror that there will always be monsters at the ends of every book.
Mm.
So a little goofy, obviously, but like, I don't know. I think that book is a great way to think about like how to write not only a horror story, but sort of any story. I mean, the cool part is I think even as adults, we sort of just subconsciously get sort of the joy and even some of the thrill of that book without having to dissect it like I did, which is obviously a little bit tongue in cheek. I don't know. And the cool way to only like to describe that book is sort of, or especially as a kid, I think like if that's your favorite book, it's your favorite because of how it makes you feel. And like when you think of that book, you remember how the book made you feel, not necessarily the sort of the same joke going over and over again. So I think that's how all best stories work. All the best stories, any kind of stories. I mean, the thing that they have in common is not only that they make you feel, but they make you want to feel. And I would say that, especially in the 21st century, where for so much of our time, like we're trying to disengage, right? Because we're just bombarded with the news, our phone, all this terrible stuff. And people even say, oh, I have to disconnect, I have to disengage. And I think the magic of fiction is that it makes you want to engage, and that's a healthy thing. The last thing I would add about another thing that I'm really drawn to this book is sort of the use of, the postmodern narrative or, the use of metafiction in this case. I think, for the writers out there, some of the worst advice you could ever get would be for a teacher or a writing teacher or anyone to tell you that you can't put texts or blog posts or tweets or whatever you want into your story because it'll age your story. The idea of deathless prose is, to me, it's a total canard. It's a worthless thought. I mean, our job is to write stories for people who are going to read it now, right? I don't care about the chuds, and when I say chuds, I mean the cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers from the 1980s movie. That we are, what chuds are going to be left in 50, 70 years from now are going to read our book. That's not my worry. But honestly, if you do your job as a writer, people from the future should be able to go back and read your book as long as you did your job. Like the quote unquote world building will be there. This is a book of this time. I don't do it for every book, but like so many of my books, I don't know, to me, that's sort of the fun, the narrative sort of like lift and I don't want to say tricks or sort of the fun part. Like I had a book called The Paul Bearers Club, and throughout the book, one of the characters actually writes notes in the margins and cross stuff out. And even in horror movie and novel, which I'll just read from briefly, there's the regular text, but at different points in the book, it switches over to screenplay sort of font. The only thing is, you have to make sure that those sort of extra textual approaches has to be in the book for a reason. It just can't be there for like a cheap trick. Anyway, sorry. So let me, as your professor promised, I'm going to read just for 5 minutes from the first chapter of horror movie and novel, which is coming out July 11th. And actually, it hasn't been announced yet, but my publisher is, for the first time ever, is sending me on like a US book tour, and I will be in Chicago. I think it's June
Oh.
13th. Yeah, so I'll definitely post about that online, like when it's official, like when it happens. But yeah, it looks like I'm being sent to Chicago, which is very exciting.
The first time ever?
I was in Chicago one weekend
No,
in
no, no.
like
I mean, the first
2000.
time they're sending you on the national book tour?
Yeah. Like usually my tours are New England and I go to New York City, maybe Pennsylvania, but stuff that I drive to and stuff they don't pay for. Uh, with my newest book deal, we actually negotiated, hey, you have to send us on a 5-city book tour.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's exciting. Although maybe by the end of it, I'll be exhausted and be like, why did I do that to myself? No, I'm very excited to visit cities I've never been to, including, I don't count my going to Chicago one weekend in 2002, where I was just in the hotel the whole weekend.
Uh,
All right, so chapter 1, this is called Now the Producer. Each chapter sort of oscillates between now and then, and it sort of gives you instructions. Anyway, our little movie that couldn't had a crew size that has become fluid in the retelling, magically growing in the years since Valentina uploaded the screenplay and 3 still photos to various online message boards and 3 brief scenes to YouTube in 2008. Now that I live in Los Angeles, temporarily, please, I'm not a real monster, I can't tell you how many people tell me they know someone or are friends of a friend of a friend who was on set, our set. Like now, I'm having coffee with one of the producers of the horror movie remake. Or is it a reboot? I'm not sure of the context, or excuse me, I'm not sure of the correct term for what it is they will be doing. Is it a remake if the original film shot more than 30 years ago but was never screened? Reboot is probably the proper term, but not with how it's applied around Hollywood. Producer guy's name is George, maybe. I'm pretending to forget his name in retribution for our first meeting 6 months ago, which was over Zoom. While I was holed up in my small, stuffy apartment, he was outdoors, traipsing around a green space. He apologized for the sunglasses and his bouncing sun-dappled phone image and that I can do whatever I want way, and explained he just had to get outside, get his steps in, because he'd been stuck in his office all morning, and he would have been there all afternoon. Translation: I deign to speak to you, however, you're not important enough to interrupt a planned walk. A total power play. I was tempted to hang up on him or pretend my computer screen froze, but I didn't. Yeah, I'm talking tougher than I am. I couldn't afford to throw away any chance, as slim as it might be, to get the movie made. Within the winding course of our one-way discussion, in which I was nothing but flotsam in the current of his river, he said he'd been looking for horror projects as horror is hot. But because everything happening in the real world was so grim, he and the studios wanted horror that was, quote, uplifting and upbeat. His own raging waters were too loud for him to hear my derisive snort laugh or see my eye roll. I didn't think anything would ever come from that chat. In the past 5 years, I've had countless calls with studio executives and sycophantic producers who claim to be serious about rebooting horror movie and wanting me on board in a variety of non-decision-making, low-pay capacities, which equated to their hoping I wouldn't shit on them or their overtures publicly, as I and my character inexplicably have a small but vociferous or voracious fan base. After being subjected to their performative enthusiasm, elevator pitches, same movie but a horror comedy, same movie but with 20-somethings living in LA or San Francisco or Atlanta, same movie but with an alien, same movie but with time travel, same movie but with hope. And after being subjected to more promises to work together, I'd never hear from them again. But I did hear back from this one producer guy. I asked my friend Sarah, and a possibly smart East Coast transplant screenwriter, what she knew about him and his company. She said he had shit taste, but he got movies made. 2 for 2. Today, producer guy George and I are in Culver City, comparing the size of our grandes while sitting at an outdoor metal wicker table, the table wobbly because of an uneven leg, which I anchor in place with the toe of one sneakered foot. Now that we're in person, face to face, we are on more equal ground, if there is such thing as equality. He's tan, wide-chested, wearing aviator sunglasses, a polo shirt, and comfortable shoes, and younger than I am by more than a decade. I'm dressed in my usual uniform, faded black jeans, a white t-shirt, and a world weariness that is both affect and age-earned. He talks about the movie and character arcs and other empty buzzword story terms he gleaned from online listicles. Then we discuss what my role might be off screen, my upcoming meeting with the director, and other stuff that could have been handled in email or a phone or a Zoom call, but I had insisted on the in-person. Not sure why, beyond the free coffee and to have something to do while I wait for pre-production to start. Maybe I wanted to show George my teeth. As we're about to part ways, he says, "Hey, get this. I randomly found out that a friend of my cousin, a close cousin, we'd spent 2 weeks of every summer on Lake Winnipesaukee together. Anyway, this friend of hers worked on a horror movie with you. Isn't that wild?" The absurd part is that I'm supposed to go along with his and everyone else's faked connection to and remembrance of a movie that has become fabled, become not real, when it was at one time decidedly quantitatively real. And then the kicker is there's the social expectation that I will acknowledge our new shared bond. I get it. It's all make-believe, the business of make-believe, and it bleeds into the unreality of the entertainment ecosystem. Maybe it should be that way. Who am I to say otherwise? But I refuse to play along. That's my power play. I ask, "Oh yeah? What's their name?"
Hey,
I insist people cough up the name of whoever was supposedly on set with me 30 years ago. I respect the person who at least gives one, putting their cards on the table so I can call their bluff. Unerringly, industry person X gets rattled and is affronted that I dare ask for a name they cannot produce. The umbrella over our heads is faulty, imperfect. The umbrella over our head offers faulty, imperfect shade. Producer guy George's tan is suddenly less tan. He asks, "My cousin's name?" No, I'm patient. After all, with my ceremonial associate producer title, he and I are going to be coworkers. "The name of your cousin's friend, the one who was on set with me." "Oh, right. Yeah, she didn't tell me, and I forgot to ask." He waves his hands in the air, a forget I said anything gesture. "Her friend was probably a grip or an extra, and you wouldn't remember." I lean across the tabletop, lifting my foot away from the leg's clawed foot. The table quakes. George's empty coffee cup jumps, then falls onto its side, circles an imaginary drain, leaking drops of tepid brown liquid. He fumbles for the cup comically, but he's too ham-fisted for real comedy, which must always include pathos. He rights the cup, then leans in, sucked into the gravitational pull of my terrible smile, a smile that never made it on camera once upon a time. I say, "Your cousin didn't know who was there, and let's not pretend otherwise." He blinks behind his sunglasses. Even though I can't see his eyes, I know that look. My power play is a form of mesmerism, calling out the liars as liars without having to use the word. I break the spell by asking him if I can borrow $10 for parking because I don't have any cash on me, which may or may not be true. How to win friends and influence people, right? Listen, I'm a nice person. I am. I'm honest, polite, giving when I can be, commiserative, and I'll give you the white t-shirt off my back if you need it. I can even tolerate being buried in bullshit. It comes with my messed up gig. But people lying about being on horror movies set gets to me. I'm sorry, but if you weren't there, you didn't earn the right to say you were. It's less narcissism on my part, though I can't guarantee there's not a piece of that in there. Does a narcissist know if they are one? And more, am I protecting the honor of everyone else's experience? Since I can't change anything that happened, that's all I can do. Our movie did not feature a crew of hundreds, never mind tens, as in multiple tens. There weren't many of us then, and yeah, there are a lot fewer of us still around now. I'll stop there. That's the first chapter. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for listening to my blather.
Oh,
Into
yeah,
Grover.
to read that because I had the honor of having read Survivor Song because I was teaching it. But damn, you know what people are saying about your book, and it's not just one circle. They're saying this is probably they're assuming it's going to be your best novel. I don't know why or who started this rumor, but it's out there, man. I'm like lies. This is just one of many.
Yeah.
So let's open up for questions either about the presentation or this wonderful chapter that we just heard, which is enticing. Whether you're familiar with Paul Tremblay's work or not, I recommend all of his books, all of them.
Thank you.
Amazing writer. And people who are on Zoom, feel free to unmute or pose a question in the chat. I'd be happy to speak it for you. Who wants to start?
Yeah. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be about that book in particular. Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have never read any of your books. But so I have a question about this book, what you read.
Yeah.
Is it fiction or nonfiction? I mean, is there actually a movie?
It's totally fiction. Sort of the I guess the plot summary of the book is, so this nameless character who just read to you, well, not I read to you, but like the character speaking first person, he played a character in a movie that they're just calling horror movie. In a 1993, a bunch of 20 somethings made or filmed, I should say, filmed a disturbing art house, low budget horror movie in Rhode Island. And because something happened toward the end of filming, the movie never made it to screen. And so now it's 30 years later, and this gentleman is in on sort of the attempted reboot of the original movie. So the story bounces back and forth between the present, him trying to get it made, the past, and within the book I actually include the entire screenplay of that original movie.
Oh,
So it's sort of a, I don't know, it's sort of a mix of like a really disturbing art house horror movie plus hopefully, I'm glad I heard Jesús laughing a little bit. Like, I'm kind of hoping that there is definitely like a slice of like Hollywood satire. That's some of the nonfiction. I will certainly say that a lot of the stuff that references Hollywood are things that I've experienced, or other writer friends that have experienced, Hollywood just really trying to take advantage of novelists, because we don't have a union. We're not, unfortunately, we can't join the WGA, which is the screenwriters union. They have a lot more protections than we do when it comes to dealing with producers and whatnot. So our only revenge is to write about it in a novel.
you all should unionize, and I'm telling you, and I have had this very brief conversation. But I do believe now, especially with AIs and not just ChatGPT, just AI produced books, there should be some kind of protection. There are books
Yeah.
being put out now that readers don't know are drafted by AIs and they're buying them. And so that really raises the question of copyright, of writers' rights. You know what I'm saying? It's a major problem and it's gonna get worse.
Oh
I'm
yeah, it's just
union.
publishing is just so diffuse. I just don't know how like we would. I mean, someone smarter than me would have to be able to start up. I mean, because what you're talking about is we would have to deal not only with like publishers, but we would have to deal with Amazon that will just throw up like AI books. I mean, there's
True,
so many
true.
different levels. Yeah,
And that
that's not.
that's the thing. Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing about okay, I'll shut up because I'm gonna nerd out about
Yeah,
books for that. Because I also own an independent press. It's a charity press, and people are. I mean, Amazon has a monopoly in Kindle. It has a monopoly in a lot of things, and so even the wholesale distributors are really difficult to deal with. So I can't get my books into Barbara's bookstore, which is close by, because they don't want to deal with Amazon. But dealing with Ingram is a nightmare. I hate to say, you know what I'm saying? And they'll buy books from Ingram. But I do
yeah.
think I'm pro union. I mean, you know this, Paul. I'm pro union. I'm an activist.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
organizing all workers, and I stood with the not just the WGA, but the Actors Guild too that were on strike. You
Yep,
know, so I think you're absolutely right that something needs to be done so writers aren't taken advantage at any level. You know, I support that. Okay, sorry, I'm proselytizing. Go ahead,
that's
Maria.
okay. Well, I
Yeah.
was going to say really briefly, just since you mentioned AI, sorry, just to interrupt. I
No,
was
go
typing
ahead,
because I was
brother. Go
looking
ahead.
for, I was looking for the website. I can't find it, but myself and a few other writers are, I mean, there's a whole bunch of writers doing this, but myself, Christopher Golden, Sarah Silverman, and Richard Cadre, we have a class action lawsuit against OpenAI and ChatGPT. That's sort of in the process. We actually have to meet with the judge in like mid-June. So, there are some of us trying to fight back at least against the AI side of things.
And that's when we should all light candles and pray and send happy vibes. I'll be doing it. I pray for you all the time, Paul. You should feel my energies, not just for you,
Well,
but for
thank
all
you.
of it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because it's a struggle is real. Just in general, it's a hustle. You know. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you. So first I just want to thank you for reminding me of a very scary book from my childhood.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that, I was taken back, and I love you talking me through it because obviously it's like whatever 8-year-old, I never thought of it that way. And now
Right.
as an adult and a teacher of English myself, I see all these literary references that were lost on a child, but it reminded me, like, even after I knew the end of that story as a kid, I was always still a little scared when I read it. Like, it
Yeah.
does that good of a job of building that tension. So thank you for that. That was very fun. My question is about kind of non-traditional text on the page. So my literature class right now are actually reading poetry, and we were talking just in the first half of our class before this about how you know a poem when you see it, kind of, right? Whereas most text, you know, I think I couldn't tell you this is fiction or nonfiction or history until I'm reading it, right? But when we see a poem, because of its format on the page, we know it. So I was sort of drawn to your the some of the text you showed us that had like the annotations or the you know, engagement with like a digital interface or something. So can you just talk a little bit about kind of your intention behind or the effect you're going for with using that non-fictional text in your writing?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, because I've done it like so often, it's kind of hard to lump it all into one umbrella, but I can a little bit. Typically when I'm writing horror, 'cause, I mean, I've written other stuff besides horror, but like I want to say my default, I should say my default, what I'm obsessed with is a better way of putting it. I try to tell these stories in what I think is the most realistic way possible, not in terms of like the literary form of realism, but to make it feel like, oh, this, not only could this really happen, or maybe this is what it would feel like if this were to happen. So what ends up happening with, you know, the book that sort of broke me open, A Head Full of Ghosts, in the book that was made into a movie, The Cabin at the End of the World. Both of those novels really employ ambiguity in regard to the supernatural element. And these aren't spoilers for the books. I never tell you if something is supernatural happening or not. You know, A Head Full of Ghosts is a riff on a possession story, and The Cabin at the End of the World is a question of whether or not the world is ending. And I think for me, the role of ambiguity for both those books, I wanted the ambiguity to be the reason why those books were scary or disturbing. The idea that we just don't know. But for those forms of ambiguity, instead of withholding information, I tried to do it the 21st century way, whereas like you are bombarded with every possible piece of information. And because of the data glut, like you have enough evidence to build whatever sort of case you want to build, but you can't build one case over the other one. The idea that you just don't know. So there's like, if I use ambiguity, there's that part of it. So oftentimes to help with that ambiguous sort of notion, I'll include, like in A Head Full of Ghosts, there's a blogger who comes in almost like a Greek chorus, and you're reading her blog posts, and it looks like blog posts, the way it's sort of typewritten out. And the blog post makes it harder to know what's real or not, because within the blog post, she said, hey, the thing you just saw that looks like this movie or this book, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that sort of served like two different things. Like, yeah, of course, if a family hired a reality TV crew to perform an exorcism, people would discuss this online, you know, and they would discuss it for years and years, and you would have these people, talking about it that way. So for me, even if it seems like a weird, outlandish thing, like or an unusual thing to like open up a novel and then you see notes in the margins, you know, there's that moment of, oh, that's different. Like, why is that there? But at the same time, to me, that felt like a realistic thing, because the book that had notes in the margins, this one here, it's a found memoir. Like someone wrote a memoir, they're not around anymore. And so for me, it was like a logic thing. Who found the memoir? Well, his best friend / frenemy. And I knew she wouldn't be able to resist saying, no, this isn't true. Or yeah, you know, I remember it this way, and actually putting it into the story. So, you know, there are times, sorry if I'm rambling.
No.
Sometimes like the narrative sort of technique is sort of the start of a story for me. But again, the trick is it has to be there for a reason. It just can't be like a bell or a whistle. So my favorite example is, geez, back in 2016, we adopted an older dog. She was between like 5 and 7. And my kids were older, you know, in high school. So people weren't home all the time. It's like, oh, I guess we should get a dog walker a couple days a week. And the dog walkers would leave notes like it was like a daycare almost, like, hey, Holly was so happy. It was great. You know, she enjoyed walking, loved belly rubs, and like pee check or poo checked. And I just thought those notes were so wild. I started trying to leave fake notes for my family, but they knew it was me right away. But in my house, like, I have to write a story that's told only through dog notes. And at first, I was like, oh, that's a great idea. But then I was like, oh, what story necessitates being told that way? It took me 2 years to figure out a way to do it. that
Interesting.
that made sense, or at least made enough sense to me. So I don't know. I'm just sort of drawn to those different things. And me as probably just being like so many of us, just a child of pop culture. Like, I mean, I came to reading later than most writers. Like for me, like I grew up in the 80s and just watched cable TV all the time and movies. And I didn't become like a reader for pleasure until my early 20s. So there's
Interesting.
all that visual media that sort of introduced me to story. And now I kind of feel like I try to maybe apply, some of those, how they made me feel, how those worked a little bit into books somehow. But I don't know. Hope I
Yeah.
answered the question.
Absolutely, thank you. That's fascinating.
Oh my gosh, Paul. Oh my gosh. I'm okay. I'm gonna start gushing. Woo! That was brilliant and beautiful. And I
Thank
actually
you.
love your style of ambiguity. I loved it in Disappearance at Devil's Rock, and which included police reports. It's beautifully done. And in The Head Full of Ghosts, I really enjoyed the blogs. I loved the I don't know, it's just something fascinating about it. It's very meta, like you were talking about postmodern literature. And if you ever get a chance to grab the copy of The Bestial Art, it's a collection of short stories that he put out. There's this brilliant short story where this little girl, she pays for ghost tours, or they pay her to take the ghost tour. And there's this incredibly frightening thing. It's scary. The picture was scarier to me than the story. Um, but tell them where you grabbed that from, because that to me was like, what? I'm always looking for pictures that my kids draw every now and then because they're so horrifying, as a point of
Yeah.
inspiration. But that was just dope, and that's
Thanks.
academic, just beautiful. Go ahead, go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was like a fun story because you never know where you get ideas from. And I know I steal from like my life and family all the time, and they're always characters. But when my daughter was young, she went through the like sort of the fun uh kid phase because we live in the suburbs, so our road isn't super busy. But she went through the phase like, oh, I want to sell lemonade out, out of the at the end of the driveway with another friend. And then she kept like doing it. And it got to the point, it's like, man, like what? I always think like what kind of weirdo would show up, which is, I think, is the easy way to do it. But then like I just had this weird image. It's like, well, what if she started selling other stuff at the end of the driveway? So the story ended up being like the first day, these two girls were selling lemonade, and they're like, this is boring. The next day, they decided to sell haunted house tours of their own house, and and they would set up like a fake haunted house. Um, and one of the ghost stories that gets told involves like something that this other character saw in a dream. And I took that image from my daughter, Emma. She drew it when she was 12. And she was having terrible dreams. She's like, oh, yeah, I have this dream like almost every night. I see this thing and then I die. And as a parent, I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. But as the horror writer, I was like, can I use that picture? Uh, and she let me use it. So yeah.
That's amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, while you were discussing the ambiguity of your books, I realized, or I'm halfway through Cabin at the End of the World right now, and so I don't know what's happening exactly. But your notes on ambiguity were interesting. I've heard about when fantasy writers use magic system, there's like the difference between hard and soft.
Mm,
Like you've got like a hard system, kind of like Harry Potter, where like you say a word and a thing happens, and like soft magic systems with like Lord of the Rings, where like you kind of lift your hands and stuff happens.
sure.
There's like a very mechanical system versus this kind of unknown power. But the difference between those two is kind of where the reader knows how magic works, and the other one is just the author knows, but they don't tell the reader. But they still have to have an understanding of what's happening. When you're writing ambiguity, do you have an idea of what you want going on, or are you kind of just playing with it and seeing what happens?
Oh, great
But
question.
yeah, that is a great question. It sort of depends on the story, but I would say, first with the head full of ghosts in the cabin at the end of the world. Um, well, let me back up a little bit. So with the head full of ghosts, my initial idea was like, oh, I'm going to write like a skeptical secular possession story because no one has done that in a while in book form. Like, we have tons of movies, but when I got into it, I was like, no, I have to keep it ambiguous. I can't like lean one way or the other. So once I did that, I purposefully tried as much as I could divorce myself from thinking there's a true answer or there's not a true answer, and just really almost imagine like that book. And similarly with Cabin, like I imagine it's like the scale of justice, except it was like the scale of is something supernatural happening or not? Like I wanted people to be able to be like, hey, there's something supernatural happening. Here's the evidence. And someone else to be perfectly equally reasonable, be like, nope, there's something not supernatural happening. Here's the evidence. So for both of those books, I when I wrote them, I did not have like an idea of, oh yeah, this is the correct way, or this is the correct answer. Because again, to me, I think what I wanted both books to feel, scary. It's hard to. I have no idea of something scary. I just want something to linger with people, or to be disturbing. I think those are things I'm more in control of.
Mm.
But the idea that you just don't know for sure to me is just such a, when you really think about it, to me that's like the most unsettling part of our day-to-day existence. Like even like our memory, our identities are so dependent upon what other people tell us. Uh, yeah, and living in the age of misinformation, like it's so hard to know. And I think in a horror story, anytime you use ambiguity, I think you're also subconsciously sort of picking at the ultimate sort of ambiguous question that awaits us all at the end, not to get too bummery or deep, but like, what happens when we die? Like we have beliefs, but we don't really know, and most horror stories are going to brush up against death in some form. So even though the story isn't necessarily about like what happens when we die, but if I'm messing around with like basically, hey, reader, you really don't know for sure what's happening. I think that really sort of gets at that, and some readers dig it and some really don't.
Oh, I love it. Man, my goal is to read all of Paul's books by this summer. That's the goal. It
Wow.
hasn't happened yet because I teach full time, but
Mm.
especially because I'm rereading some of his stuff. Go ahead, go ahead.
Paul, I have a question for you. Do you have like a routine before writing, like a ritual? Do you need coffee? Do you need a darker room in order to produce? What's your
Yeah. So, so I can't remember when I mentioned it, but I've been teaching high school. Like I didn't start writing until like I started teaching, which is sort of like a weird thing. So, for most of my adult life, uh, or almost all my adult life, I've been a high school teacher. I did take 1 year sabbatical, not this year, but the year before. So writing and teaching has always been intertwined, which meant to me that finding time to write, especially during the school year, I was just always on the hunt for time. So it became like a time management thing. So I felt like I couldn't afford any writing rituals. It was just like, hey, I've got this unexpected free period. I'm going to sit and write. Uh, or I would even be like, hey, these kids are taking a quiz. I'm working on a story. They could have been cheating their asses off. I had no idea. So I kind of miss that ability because I feel like I've lost it a little bit. So I'm talking about like the early 2000s when I was first getting serious into writing. Like I wrote a big chunk of my book, Disappearance of Devil's Rock, when my son was going to baseball clinics. They weren't games. It was just like boring practices. Games I would watch. But like it was too far away to drop him off and go home. So for those 2 hours, I would sit there with headphones in my laptop and I wrote chunks of the book. It's hard to do at first, but like if you do it enough, like you're able to sort of fall into that hole, into that space. I do find it a little bit harder now just because how much time social media takes up for everybody. But like as a writer, you're kind of almost like forced to be on there. Um, so yeah, I mean, when I have my year off though, like it was sort of nice to more fall into a routine. Like so I would get up in the morning, have breakfast, make a giant cup of tea, and then write that was my preferred sort of time, was to do it in the morning. But now that I'm teaching again, I have to write more at night. Um, so I know, like I encourage writers when they can to, I mean, do whatever works for you. Like if you find something that works, great. For me, it's always about like you train yourself into making things work. Like it took me a little while to be able to write to music, but sometimes I needed music just to block out the stuff that's happening. Because I don't know if you can see, I don't have doors to my writing area. Those are curtains. So the rest of the house is like loud. Um, same thing if I was not working at school, I wouldn't put my headphones in, but when I was at the baseball thing. But it's funny, like what sometimes you inadvertently do. So then it became like, oh, now I feel like I kind of need music to help me sort of like drop into the space. But which is fine. Yeah. So I hope that was okay. I
No,
hope I
that's
answered
on
the
point.
question.
And
Yeah.
I tell my students when I teach creative writing, do what works for you, wherever you have the best creative energy. Like for me, it's like 3 to 6 in the morning when the kids are asleep. Because otherwise, I'm not going to get anything done, right? But
Yeah.
then I just gave a workshop, not to brag, I just did a gig for a group of writers from Florida. Because social media is meant to be addictive. It is meant to absorb your time.
Yeah.
And so what I advise, especially young writers, limit yourself to three, the best social media where you're selling the most. It may not be where you think it's going to be. For me, it's Facebook, believe it or not, right? But also to limit that because you're going to get sucked in. And just give it, I'd give it maybe an hour in the morning and that's it. I do my blogging, whatever I got to do. And then the rest is writing and then it's work and then it's family and maybe watching something. I do watch stuff, because it's good for my brain. But you got to find what works for you. Some writers, like Sarah Menefee, who's a big time poet on the West Coast, she doesn't have a schedule. She writes whenever she feels like it. She'll
Mhm.
go to a coffee shop and she produces. So it really depends on you. And every project I find is also different. Like working on a novel for me is very different than working on a short story. I can work on a short story anywhere, just
Yeah.
about. What I'm saying, and so it really depends. So it depends on your rhythm. It depends on the time of the year too. Sometimes, so you kind of gotta play with it, and reflect on what works for you too. I think we don't spend enough time reflecting on things. You know what I'm saying? What is your process? Your process is going to be different than my process. Is going to be different than Paul's process. Is going to be different than that gentleman with the blue hoodie over there. It's going to be different. You know what I mean? You just gotta find your own rhythm. You know. I don't know. Does that make sense? Kind of.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Anybody else? How about people in the chat? You all have questions? You can unmic. You can ask your question. Don't be shy. No? All right. Go ahead, mijo.
Yes, so I'm just a little curious, what your, what made you want to write a book that takes place within the world of like the entertainment industry? Because I've always found that super interesting. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, how you draw inspiration for characters and such in that world.
Yeah. Thank you. It's funny, like, sometimes like, I've been very fortunate enough to actually like have book deals and sometimes like books sort of like assigned to me, like, hey, you have a book due in a year and you haven't started yet. What are you going to do? So sometimes I have to go hunting for them. With the book that I read from Horror Movie, that was like a fun sort of discovery that I fell into a rabbit hole that sort of became the book. So in the case of that book, um, I one of my writer friends who's a genius writer. If you've never read him, Stephen Graham Jones is an amazing writer, super prolific. He had mentioned like, hey, my friend Walter Chow is this really great film critic, and like during the pandemic, uh, he was hosting virtual movie matinees for the Denver Public Library. So they would show like, and during when people are on lockdown, you could watch the movie on your screen, and then he would have a Zoom discussion with like a really cool person. But he had mentioned like, oh, you should watch some of these. And the first one I watched, Walter was talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with John Darnielle, who himself is a really excellent writer. And he's also a fairly popular musician as well in the band Mountain Goats. Anyway, so I was watching these two really smart people talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, I just turned like 52 this year, or well, last time I had a birthday. I didn't watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre until my like mid to late 30s, just because I was so scared of it. Like I'm not really much of like a gore violence person. But it's a brilliant movie. And it's actually almost bloodless, which is weird. Like the original, not any of the remakes.
Right.
I do highly recommend the movie. I do not recommend any of the sequels or remakes after them. But anyway, so they're talking about the movie, and I was like, oh, wow. And Walter held up a book when he was talking. It was called Chainsaw Confidential. And it was, nonfiction written by Gunnar Hansen, the actor who played Leatherface, the original Leatherface. And at the time, like it was out of print, but it was on Audible for cheap. So I listened to it, and Gunnar wrote it, and he narrated it. It was really cool. Like very good writer. Like had no idea he was a poet before he started acting as Leatherface. And then he was talking about the movie, and there were some scenes where, I mean, this was filmed in the early 70s where there wasn't any sort of, full independent movie, where there was certainly no care for the safety of anyone on set. So there were a couple times it was like, whoa, they're really lucky the chainsaw didn't slip and get somebody.
Yeah.
And so like the first thing was like, oh, what would happen? I started thinking what would happen if the chainsaw had slipped. So that became when it ends up being a horror movie. So I mean that the movie that's in the book is not Texas Chainsaw, but it's certainly inspired by sort of the movie part was inspired by that part of it, and all the Hollywood stuff was just me sort of using like my like I said, my anecdotal experience and other writers' experiences as well. Like in that opening chapter, having a producer talk to me while he was outside walking around, that was totally something that I went through. And I was just like in my head laughing the whole time. It was like, what, like, can you imagine? Like, I'm going to do a Zoom with you, like this really important meeting, but I'm going to do it while I'm walking around outside. I mean, you might do that with a friend, but would you do that with like a prospective, as much as I hate the word in regard to art, like business partner? I don't know. Hollywood's a weird place, man.
Rude. You know, I gotta say that I was a big movie TV watcher and I read a lot. I think we're the same age though. Maybe I'm older. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It's just a number, everybody.
Yeah.
And so, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre has such a profound impact on me that whenever we drive through Texas, I get scared. Seriously, because you just never know. And so
Yeah.
it was one of the first times that I encountered cannibalism by a family that, well, wasn't really that ordinary, but it's a frightening concept. There's also a lot of open space in Texas and
Mhm.
Arizona too, where I'm from. So you just never know. You know what I'm saying? And it's that what if, right? And now we've had like serial killers and whatever, but still, man, every time you go through Texas, I'm so glad I'm leaving, going to New Mexico. But it's a really good movie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've had a question about your writing process or like your editing process, I suppose.
Mhm.
My professor, for my 247 class right now, for our first drafts, she doesn't go, tear it apart super hard because, there's hardly anything there, but she'll like ask questions about like your theme. Like, okay, so what is this writing about? What do you want the readers to feel? Is that something you ask yourself to like keep your writing in check when you're writing, or is it you just kind of put stuff out and then you like hand it off to your editor, or is it are you self-editing as you're going, or do you read back
Yeah.
and say, hey, what's here? How do I keep this sharp?
Well, first, I love the approach of your professor. I mean, that sounds very similar to what my editor does. So for me, like there's two levels of editing. Like with the big publisher, I'll have my main editor who I work with, and she's in charge of the big story things, like what you're talking about, like the big edits. That and much less interesting after that as I go through multiple rounds of copy edits, which is just typos, syntax, fact checking. And actually, I sort of enjoy going through that because I feel like, oh, these people, one, I feel like I don't know how to put a sentence together, apparently. And the other part is like, I feel very thankful that they make it better. But while I'm writing, I would probably annoy your teacher though, because I'm someone I have to edit as I go. Like I just can't. I wish I was someone who could spill it all out. Um, Typically, and it doesn't matter if it's a short story or novel. Like on a good day, I'll get 500 words. And then the next day, I will go back to the start of those 500 words. And usually I start slowly expanding this way. Um, and it'll almost feel like I'm not getting forward, but like I slowly move forward that way. And if it's a novel, no, I won't only go back to those first 500. I'll go back to the start of the chapter. So by the time like I finish a chapter, I've already sort of like picked through it a whole bunch of times.
Mm.
Um, so when I finish a full novel, I mean, it's certainly still a draft, but it's a lot more coherent than if I just like sort of spilled it all out. And it's just again, that's just the way that works for me. I don't know if that's a math brain thing or what. um, but I don't know. It's just sort of what works for me.
And plus, he also writes in small spurts. You know what I mean? So that I think that makes sense. You're not the only writer. It's annoying to me
Yeah,
because I'm like, clean up your crap after you're done writing. But I also know other prolific writers who do the same thing. So everybody has
yeah,
their own style, and that most of them are former English teachers, but they'll edit as they write. And we, Maria, will agree that we'll tell our students, no, edit at the end, right? Once you've gotten your ideas out there. But everybody's process is different. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? So I think you got to find what your rhythm is. So long, what I tell my students is, if that editor is so strong that it doesn't let you produce work, do it at the end. Tip the hat, say I see you, but come in at the end because then you won't produce, right? It is not necessarily a writer's block per se. Your editor is just very imposing and won't let you get into that creative flow. But because he's so like my brother here is so I call you my brother, right? My writing brother here is so practiced and he knows the style that he's able to do without interfering with the production of the 500 words. So you kind of have to figure out what works for you, right? Like, do you have that really strong internal editor that's going to block you, or are you able to use it as an instrument, so you get to a refined piece. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yeah, I dig that, man. I'm not that person though, Paul. I gotta edit at the end.
Yeah.
And
I would say like how we react to edits. Obviously that can be different from person to person. And sometimes you have no choice if you're in a class or a workshop and you're sharing your stories and you're getting feedback right in your face. That's a little bit different than, someone giving you comments. But I give myself, I have to, a 24-hour rule when I get edits or criticism back. I cannot, I will not allow myself to work on it or respond to it for 24 hours because I need that first day to be a whiny, petulant baby and be like, they don't get it. Why don't they get it?
doesn't?
And then,
Who doesn't?
then usually after a day, after I sleep on it kind of thing, I can be much more objective and be like, oh, I can see sort of like a compromise solution. Or, if after a day I'm like, I really don't think what they suggested is correct, I'm going to stick with what I have. But I feel like I'm doing it from a much better state of mind if I let a little bit of time pass after the initial shock of like, oh my God, I thought this was perfect and it's not.
Well, I told you too, your sentences are beautiful, just
Well, thank
gorgeous.
you.
So either you or the editor both, I mean, you got a perfect marriage going, man. I think.
Thanks.
All right. So Kirsten Aquan, I know I put your name, has a question. What's your favorite non-horror work of fiction that you'd recommend to writers? Ooh, good one.
Oh, wow. I think I'd recommend writers' favorite work. Um, I mean, for me, like reading Kurt Vonnegut when I was in my mid-20s was sort of a little bit of a revelation to me because I'd started off like so many horror writers. When I became a reader, I read Stephen King and found Peter Straub and Shirley Jackson through him. But then, when I read Kurt Vonnegut, I felt like that was the first time I was like, not only, wow, I love this. I think it was the first time I thought, wow, I want to try something like that. Because the voice just felt so like this is him sort of talking to us in this really cool sort of voice. Like I just wanted to try that. But as far as like newer writers, uh, I really love Sam Lipsite's. What's his most recent novel? Oh no, I can't remember the title because it's kind of long. But if I'm not reading horror, I like to read a lot of like humorous sort of literary fiction. I kind of feel like it's you're reacting to the same life absurdities. It's just this way with humor as opposed to horror. I will give you one more book though. It's one that I've read already multiple times, even though it's only been out for like 5 years, actually probably 10 years at this point. Actually, I think she's a Chicago writer too. Sarah Levine, Treasure Island, three exclamation points. One of the funniest books I've ever read. And it's just so smart. And I'm sure like the English professors can tell me there's an official name for this kind of novel. Like, some novels are called the Blindings Roman. I'm probably saying it wrong. But one of my favorite kind of novels is I lovingly refer to it as the first person asshole narrator. Uh, which means like it's a first person and this narrator isn't very good at isn't good at being a person. It's not that they're horrible people, but like they're just sort of a mess. And I love those kind of books. So Sarah Levine's Treasure Island, three exclamation points, features this unforgettable woman who's just an absolute mess. Yeah, and I think one of the fun parts is, publishing for years and years of sort of allows and promotes male characters doing that. But at least until fairly recently, it's kind of rare to see, a woman getting to tell a story like that. Yeah. So great question. Great question, Kristen.
Yeah, that's beautiful. She says I agree. She says she adores a first person asshole description. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. Okay, I have a question. I'll be selfish because I follow I'm a stalker fan, I guess. I follow Paul on all the socials, but I often see pictures of you, Joe Hill and De La Roca recently. Have you ever met Stephen King?
I've never met him in person, but we've exchanged a whole bunch of emails.
Yeah, I love the
Yeah.
props you do in your books. I was gonna say, no, I find that writers in general, the ones that aren't arrogant a-holes, are just amazing people. Who's one of your favorite writers? Doesn't have to be horror.
Oh, I mean, well, I'm gonna say one who is horror, who's working now. I think is, all apologies to so many of my friends who are excellent writers, but Mariana Enriquez, I think, is my current favorite writer.
Oh,
She's just incredible. I've already like she put out, what was it, last year? a big giant 800-page epic novel that's sort of like Roberto Bolaño meets sort of cosmic horror, and it's just so well written. I've already read it twice. She has a new short story collection coming out later this summer. She's great. I've been lucky enough to meet her as well. So she's a
Is
favorite.
she the one that wrote Gothic?
What's that?
Is she the one that wrote Gothic?
No, I don't know that I'm not familiar with that one.
No, I'll have to go back and check it. No, I was curious. It's another. I need to catch up.
Oh,
on
and I would say Patrick DeWitt is another favorite writer. Again, he's someone who's more like on the literary humor side, very
Right.
dry, very funny. Also, Matt Johnson. Uh, he has a book called Pym. That's a really fun riff on Poe's Gordon Pym story. That's very satirical, and it's about class and race, and it's very funny. He's a great
Right.
writer too.
Brilliant, brilliant. So Sherry Chavez wants to know, she's a huge fan of Stephen Graham Jones and his writing, but do you have a favorite 80s horror movie or recent horror movie that's your favorite?
My favorite 80s horror movie is The Thing.
Okay.
It's probably not that exciting of an answer. Like I wish I had like a deep cut for you. More recent, and this movie's probably about 11, 12 years old now, is a movie called Lake Mungo. I'm sort of like unhealthily obsessed with that book. My book, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, could probably be correctly criticized as being Lake Mungo fan fiction on some level.
Okay.
Um, yeah, but no, another recent favorite movie too is Saint Maud.
Oh, I've not seen that.
Saint Maud. Yeah,
Wow.
that's an A24 movie, sort of horror adjacent, but just an amazing movie.
Oh, I gotta check that out. No, I gotta say The Thing was also one of my favorites, just because you were left to wonder at that ending whether. Okay, I will spoil it for you, but that ending was brilliant. And I love that scene where Patrick Swayze drops his drink in the computer and calls it a bitch because a cheating bitch. And I'm like, damn, that was profound. Like think about it. They're in the middle of nowhere, and he just ruined the best piece of entertainment. Like, what's he gonna do with his time now? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it is just a beautiful movie if you haven't seen it. And I think the original, they should have never messed with that original because the movies afterwards were absolute crap, you know?
Mhm.
But no, that's brilliant. I love that. I love that. Any other questions? We got like 22 minutes left, and now I'm gonna start asking up.
I have one more.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I haven't read any of your books, so I would like to ask, which one are you the most proud of? Or which one you say, well, you're gonna start reading this one, etc.
Okay, so I'm going to give you two possibilities, if that's not obnoxious. I mean, I think A Head Full of Ghosts definitely sort of is my favorite, partly because it helped save my career. Like I had published two novels in 2009, 2010 that were sort of quirky, darkly comedic, first person asshole, private detective novels, called The Little Sleep and No Sleep to Wonderland. And I'm proud of those books, but my first go around with big publishers was really kind of a disaster. It didn't go well at all. It's all their fault. I'm going to blame them, not my book. But like, so after 2010, the publisher essentially dropped me, and I spent the better part of 3 years just really sort of like feeling sorry for myself and feeling bitter, and being jealous at other writers, successes, which are all very natural emotions. But what you can't do is let those sort of take over your headspace, because those are the page killers.
Yep.
So once I learned how to, I don't want to say ignore, once I learned how to sort of let go and just like acknowledge those feelings and then let them go away. The idea for Head Full of Ghosts literally fell into my lap. I think it was sort of just like a reward. My subconscious rewarded me. So, that book, and then, that book got Stephen King's notice. So for a lot of reasons, I'm very proud of that book, and it saved my career. But I do think, again, I'm a terrible judge of what's scary or is not scary. But if you're not like a horror person, I think maybe that book is scary. I am also super proud of, I think if you're more like a literary reader, I think the Paul Barron's Club is more sort of your speed as like a found memoir. I mean, there's definitely some weird stuff. But I don't think it's as horror as some of the other stuff. And that book is very much a thinly veiled autobiography in some ways. But that's sort of part of the joke is like, this is a found memoir of who this character is. So I'm very proud of that one, even though that one probably has my lowest Goodreads rating. I take that as a badge of worth in the opposite direction.
But you know, Paul, I gotta say that in A Head Full of Ghosts, one of the most terrifying scenes for me, and I'm not easily scared, yo. I've been watching horror, living it, folklore, the tales my mom and my abuelita and my dad told me. Like I live, breathe, eat. But the scene where the older sister was talking to Mary in the bedroom, oh my gosh, that is haunting. It is terrifying, legit terrifying. And maybe it's because I had an older sister with a total bruja, you know what I'm saying? But that is very, very, very I love that part. Go ahead, Maria.
Thank you.
So going off of Priscilla's question, I so appreciate it. Made me think. So, my class, we're reading contemporary American literature, and so we just suddenly added you to our reading list.
Oh, well, thank you.
Overnight ordered growing things because we don't have time to read a whole novel.
Sure.
Good choice. Good choice.
So I ordered your book of short stories. It's arriving tomorrow, and I'm going to scan some of them for my class. So my question is, from that collection, what are your suggested 2 or 3 short stories that we should read? The best ones.
Oh boy, I should pull that out.
But
So yeah, well, I mean that book. I mean it would be probably too long because it's more like a novella. But that book does have the notes from the dog walker story in it. Just if you were interested to see like how a story was told through dog notes.
I can get you the
But I think the 2 stories that I hear the most from teachers and people about, one is called "It's Against the Law to Feed the Ducks," and that's a very quiet. I guess the first time I used ambiguity in a way that like I ended up talking about it later, like without really knowing that I was sort of doing that. And then there's another story called 19 Snapshots of Dennisport. And this story, this story is told through the description of 19 photos in a 19 photos in a sort of like a keepsake book kind of thing. Another sort of weird narrative sort of technique kind of story. But thank you. I appreciate that. I hope students enjoy the stories if they get a chance to read them.
They will.
Where to find you?
You know, and he's really great. He will respond to your, not that you want to like, he's an amazing person and engages. That's one of the things I love about Paul. But
thank you.
My students love Survivor Song. They loved it. And just really great narration, you know. Hey, I do have a question though, Paul, because I know that we didn't talk about the movie A Head Full of Ghosts. I know you don't have a lot to do with, but right? Yeah, let's Robert Downey Jr. looks like, is he producing it or no?
Well, he's part of the production team, and these same 2 production teams have been involved since like 2015. So really briefly, like there's if your story or book gets optioned, that means they're renting usually 18 months exclusive access to your story. And then at the end of the 18 months, they have to decide, are we going to renew it or let the rights go back to you? And at some point, like if it actually is becoming a movie, then they purchase the rights. So like an option fee is, very small or a fraction of what it would be to actually buy the rights to the movie. So we're actually in a very strange place with A Head Full of Ghosts because the option ran out like a week ago. And yeah, so we're supposedly getting another offer from them, but like as of this point in time, I have no idea. It could be possible that we're starting over from scratch and we're trying to sell that book to somebody else next week. I don't know.
Wow, I didn't know that's what happened. You literally sell the rights to your novel when it becomes a movie?
Once typically what happens is that sort of clause will kick in the day they start filming, because anything can fall apart up until the day it starts filming. And that protects both the studio from having to send out a big check, and it protects the writer too, because if they paid me all the money for buying the rights right now, I wouldn't lie. It'd be good to have all that money. But if it falls apart, then no one else would ever be able to make the movie because they bought the rights.
Then, okay, I'm just being nosy because who never knows. But then after that, the sales in your books don't go to you anymore?
Oh, no. It's just they only buy film rights. That's all they get. They don't get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo,
Oh yeah, no. So in the cabinet at the end of the
Terrified lump
world,
in my throat.
no,
That's
my
amazing.
yeah, the sales for my book, The Cabinet at the End of the World, definitely got a bump from, the movie, the subpart, the not the sub superior movie. Sub superior, is that a word? Yeah, well,
Hey, I get
less
you though.
less superior movie. Definitely
I was
helps the sales of the book somewhat.
I was talking about that with another student. I mean, I'm sorry, we nerd out quite a bit, and we talk
Yeah.
about a lot of stuff. But we were talking about the ending of that movie compared to the novel. That we both agreed they completely M. Night Shyamalan completely effed up the ending of that movie. Although we enjoyed the movie very much, we just watched it in my creative writing class. I know it sounds like I'm
Oh,
all
nice.
I
Yeah.
am. And today we watched another horror movie to talk about mixed genres. We watched The Cabin in the Woods, which is classic. If you've not seen it, beautiful, beautiful, recommended screenplay. Which is a terrible segue into my actual question about screenplays. Did you already know how to write screenplays? Because I know you don't have not to throw dirt because it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. Y'all don't need an MFA to write. Okay, you can write by practice, by reading, by studying. But did you have to teach yourself how to write a screenplay, or did you take a class in it?
No, I've taken 0 writing classes. And I don't say that as like an anti-intellectual stance. It's just sort
That
of,
actually did not
yeah,
hurt my
it's just sort
heart.
of like the realities of like my, teaching math and just writing. That's not to say I haven't had help. I've been very lucky that I've had mentors along the way,
Nice.
almost like inexplicably, like someone like Stuart Anand, who's like one of the best American novelists of, the last 40 years, like sort of like took me under his wing a little bit. So, you still get help, and I still do get help from tons of other writers like Stephen Graham Jones, and I often will share manuscripts with each other and, ask for edits and things like that. So, yeah. So as far as like the screenwriting stuff goes, I've barely dipped my toe in it. And sort of the running gag in horror movie is that like right off the bat, like the person who wrote the screenplay, and this is not a spoiler, admits like this is a very unorthodox screenplay and I did it this way on purpose. I mean, so it was a little bit of a way for me to, to cheat with the form of the screenplay.
To fudge it.
So I've messed around with it a little bit. But like, I wouldn't be so arrogant to think that, I could just like be really good at a screenplay right away. And it's like, I spent years writing short stories and I finally got like pretty decent at it. And then I just started over with novels. Like the first novels I tried writing were terrible. And, the first novel that I sold in 2007 and came out in 2009 was like the fourth and a half that I'd written. So, yeah. So screenplays, I'm just starting out. I'm just sort of figuring out what it's like.
I imagine that it will hone because your dialogue is beautiful. I know I keep saying wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, a lot of readers work is what I'm getting at. It's beautiful. But I do, and you can check it out at the public library. I actually have Paul Burr's Club in the Kindle. But oh shoot, I lost. This is what I get for gushing. I lost my train of thought. Oh hell, it's gone. It's gone forever. But welcome. Kathy McKnight is also a member of the Horrors Forum that I was telling you about, who was saying how your work is so beautiful that she would read a math text. I would too. I would. That's amazing.
I wouldn't do that to you, but thank you, Kathy.
Hey, Sue, I'm gonna steal my class because we end at 3:20.
Yo, welcome to stay.
So I want
Next, well, okay, before we end, Kathy, feel free to ask questions. All right. Oh, I'm gonna add Kathy to the pool. Maybe. All right. So let's do this mathematically. Somehow I just had this great idea. I'm gonna give away Kindle books and maybe hard copy, but after payday because I gotta get paid. Usually I'm more prepared, but I forgot about spring break. All right. So pick a number less than 10, Paul.
Do I say it out loud or?
Yeah, say it out loud.
Okay. 9.
Oh boy. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a method to my madness. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Isaac, who left, wins the book. We're gonna do it again. We're gonna go faster. 1, 2.
I can pick another number if you want.
Okay, pick another number, a smaller number.
3.
All right. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Winner, chicken dinner. Maria, you win a book. I put you in the pool. Yes, you do. All right, let's do this again. We're gonna shuffle them though. Y'all like cheater, fucking eater. 1, 2, 3. Roberto Salgado, winner. The question is this: what kind? Do you want a collection of short stories? Do you want me to wait until his book comes out? I will be here. Actually, no, I'm teaching via Zoom. or paperback? What would you prefer? What's your preference? What's your a collection of short stories? Collection of short stories? Maria, you as well?
I want his new book.
His new book. Okay, for you, the new book. For the others, collection of short stories. The beast you are. I vote the beast you are, since you've already are studying the other stuff.
Yeah.
Normally, when I have events, I do have books, but like I wasn't prepared today. I apologize for that. Just but I did bring snacks. We almost didn't have snacks.
Ooh, snacks.
Snacks are good. Good. Hey, listen, Paul. As ever, I mean, this is just tremendous and amazing. I know the students have to go. We have a few minutes, and we're going to stay on for the people that want to stay on. I know that McKnight may have some questions from you or for you, but I just want to thank you again, and it's always a pleasure. I've learned so much wisdom about writing. So let's give Paul a huge round of applause, and we'll stay on for a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you.
The audience the live audience was beautiful. And you remind me, it's Roberto Salgado, so I'll try and get these books as soon as, except for Maria's book. You want a hard copy, paperback, mijo? Okay, all right. So let's just maybe take a couple more questions. I'm really leaving it for Kathy. Kathy, if you want to ask a question. Hi, Kathy, I see you. Kathy's a huge fan. So we'll stay on for a little bit longer, and then we'll close out. Have an amazing day. You're welcome to stick around. You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, please take those snacks with you, or I'm going to eat them. Yeah, you have a question, Kathy? Thank you, Ayo. No pressure. You're muted, sister. You got to unmute, sister. Kathy, you're still muted. Don't you just Zoom? Hey, there we go. Go ahead, sister.
I'm so sorry. I'm not used to this.
That's okay.
Zoom thing. I work nights, and I woke up so late. That's why I was so late.
Oh, no problem.
Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. I had questions yesterday, and now I'm like so tired. So Pallbearers Club's probably my favorite one. I know one question.
Thank you.
I have a Mercy in my life. His name was Scott. Hopefully he maybe doesn't see this. But anyway, I was wondering if she was maybe based on a person that really influenced you in real life and brought you, because I know you're a punk guy.
Yeah. No, I kind of wish when I was in high school, I sort of had a friend like Mercy, even though, like, obviously I don't know how good she was for art. Like the starting point for me was honestly like, art was like 85% me, and I thought Mercy was like 10%. And the other 5 was all made up. I don't know if that math works out right, but like especially in the margins, Mercy's voice is like the voice of my inner editor, the one that isn't like so supportive that you have to deal with, though.
That makes sense.
I really got to read that book. Yeah,
it's so good.
You emboldened me. I put out a hardback of my favorite, my bestseller, I guess, and I put a section in there of what inspired the book, and a lot of it was childhood trauma, my sister beating me up, and all that. But one of the things I love about your books are the bits where you talk about where the inspiration comes from. I love that. I think it's one of the
Thank
best.
you.
And I wish people would just bring it back. That it's kind of,
it's funny. My publisher sort of made me do it for Head Full of Ghosts. So when I say made me do it, like they were like, "Hey, we want you to write something extra for the paperback." I was like, "Oh, okay." I thought for that book it was fun to be like, "Hey, here are all the references," and then with each book they were like, "Hey, can you do it again?" Although for Pallbearers, they ended up just putting it online as opposed to publishing it in the book, because I don't think that book sold as well as the other one. So they were like, we don't want to add more pages and more cost to the next book. But I'm doing it again I did it again for Horror Movie, because Barnes & Noble is going to be printing like an exclusive Barnes & Noble edition for Horror Movie. And that'll include like the liner notes and another essay and stuff like that.
Nice. No, I love that. I also love it when writers put comprehension questions at the end too. Actually,
that was the worst thing ever. Like for
Really?
Head Full of Ghosts was writing the book club questions. That was so hard. I'm glad they've never asked me to do that again, because I would have said no.
I enjoyed it. I actually influenced another writer to do that.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
I'm teaching this book in my class right now. It's a dystopian surreal book. And I insisted so much. He put comprehension questions in there, an interview. He put art in it. It's a damn beautiful book, though. And I'm like, yo, it's legit. Really, it's called Harsh Reality if you want to check it out. The cover is ugly. Sorry if you're listening to this, brother. But the inside of the book is beautiful.
That sounds cool.
I like that too when writers do that. I love it. And it's not just because I'm a writer, it's because as a reader, it's next level for me, you know.
Mhm.
Any other parting questions for Paul? I know it's been go ahead.
I have a question. You're a math teacher, so
Yes.
I write fiction. I'm just starting seriously writing. And so you've been writing fiction for a long time, for 20 years. What is there a percentage that comes from your real life versus made up, or does it fluctuate? The percentages go back and forth, go up and down?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it fluctuates. Although I think the best way to explain it is again, crib from my friend Stephen Graham Jones. When I first met him, every book he would sign would say, "This one is pure autobiography." I'd be like, "Stephen, this book is about a time traveling camopede." um, but now, I mean, now that I've written, Jesus, almost like 10 books now, I sort of get what Stephen meant by that. Clear, some stories lean way more into the autobiography than others. Like, you know, uh, the Paul Bears Club leans in so hard, I was a little worried that I emptied the bucket and I would have nothing left for other stories. But now, like you rest and you find out there's other things. Um, but for me, like the fun part has been like each story is different, and I think that's important to remind yourself. Like there's a balance, even like for new writers just starting out. Like you've written a story, you want your next story to be different, but you also want to be like, hey, I did this before, I can do it again. So it's like a little bit of a balance of like, oh, I can do this. And for me, it's just about being open to inspiration. Like, um, I find that like I'm always thinking about the thing I'm working on when I'm really like deep into it, even when I'm not writing. I feel like a lot of stuff happens that way. So I just make sure I keep like a notebook with me. Um, you know, so like if an idea sort of hits me, I write it down.
Yeah, we talked about the magpie or last time how you just get inspiration from a lot of different places. I carry like
Right.
multiple notebooks, but now with technology, I have a Google Docs document
Yep.
in case I lose the phone, you know, and I just jot down ideas every now and then.
Yep.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, I guess we kind of flirted with this question, never asked. What drew you to writing? Because there's a stereotype of math people don't mind, and writers don't know math, which is BS. But
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's kind of hard to explain. I would say like I had a want for a creative outlet. I think a few things like, when I was growing up in high school, I wasn't very confident. And then I went to college and really sort of blossomed there. And like, I don't know, I sort of figured out it's okay to like things. It's okay to be passionate about things,
right,
which sounds sort of like dumb, but like as a high schooler, like you make fun of each other because, oh, he's trying hard in his homework or he's doing this. And on the internet, everyone shits on people if they like something. But like as someone who's going to do art, like it's okay to like things. And for me, that was like an important thing to just to recognize. And if I liked the thing enough, I found myself wanting to try it, like knowing I would never be as good at it. So like I've before I started writing, I started learning how to play the guitar because I love music so much. It's like I have to try it. Like, um, and so for much of the late '90s. I was, sort of a hobbyist musician and a hobbyist writer, but then I sort of figured out I was a better writer than musician, so I stuck with it. Um, but honestly, and even now it comes from that. Like when I read something that I love, it really inspires me to want to try to do something close to it, just so I can sort of sneak up to stand maybe like 10 feet behind it or something.
nice,
Uh,
nice.
yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that, and I think that's important to teach these days. I also love the fact you're a huge inspiration to me because we're both professors, we're busy, and to fight for that time to write is hard, especially when you have kids and and all that. I'm not that I'm saying you shouldn't have kids to be a writer. Both can happen, and be balanced. But I think that's amazing. It's beautiful. You're also one of the writers that I respect a lot that does not have a master's in fine arts. Gabino doesn't have a master's in fine arts either.
Oh,
Cynthia
I didn't
does.
know that.
Yeah, he does not. But it's the funny thing, he teaches in an MFA program.
He's teaching. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gabino Iglesias was the second Puerto Rican-born writer to win the Bram Stoker last year. Cynthia Pelay was the first for a collection of poetry called Crime Scene, which I actually have to go pick up at the bookstore. But I love that. I love the fact that there are prolific writers who studied and did the hard work, and like I'm shocked that you've never taken a writing class, but I'm not surprised. You've done the hard work. I love it. I love that. Well, listen, Paul, this is as ever. It's been so amazing. I just am so happy that you spend time with us and give us so much wisdom about the writing process. Just cannot wait to read horror movie. I'm like waiting for payday to pre-order it, man. Like it's just gonna click away, you know. But recommend all of his work.
Well, thank you.
Hope he turns out, and wish you all the best in this ChatGPT lawsuit. Constantly praying for you and for the victory of all these other writers, man. You know, but so grateful. And no, it's just a couple of us. Hey, let's give it up for Paul. That was beautiful. Beautiful.
Woo!
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. No, this was a lot of fun. I
My
appreciate
brother.
it.
Hey, I'm gonna be teaching this summer remotely, but hopefully we'll be in the city and maybe we'll be able to wine and dine you and show you the best places to eat. You know what I'm saying? Or at least
Yeah.
recommend. All right, my friend. Have a blessed day. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
blessed
you.
day,
Nice meeting everybody.